This is Corner Notes with DCC. I'm Eric Taylor, Artistic Director for the Detroit Children's Choir. The Detroit Children's Choir uses the power of choral music to foster musical excellence and build an inclusive community of creative, confident, and focused youth and teens throughout southeastern Michigan. This year, the Detroit Children's Choir is celebrating its 15th anniversary. What started off as one choir in 2006 has now turned into a network of school, neighborhood, and civic programs that has touched the lives of so many students throughout our city. And I can honestly say, it starts with an amazing person who has made such an impact in our city. She founded the program, the Detroit Children's Choir, in 2006. And it's because of what she's done for music education in our city that we are here celebrating 15 years. If you've ever seen her teach, it's kind of like watching Wayne Gretzky play hockey. It's kind of like watching Mozart compose. It is so amazing to watch, and so it is my absolute honor to introduce our founder and artistic director emeritus of the Detroit Children's Choir, Ms. Carol Schoch. Carol, it is such a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, it is my pleasure, and I'm just kind of amazed that it's 15 years already.
I
So
know, it's
thank
amazing.
you very much for having me be a part of it. I
Oh
appreciate
my gosh, it's such the pleasure is all mine, to be able to talk about what's happened with the program over the years, and especially during this time. Like, who would have thought that there would be a pandemic
it. Yeah.
during this time period? But to be able to just share and to talk about music with you is just an absolute joy. So thank
Well, I think it's amazing what you're doing through the pandemic. I'm glad it's a young person like you that's dealing with all this technology because I mean otherwise it would just come to a complete halt. So
My gosh, thank you. That really means a lot. So Miss Schoch, just thank you for taking the time to be here today. And I just wanted to just kind of go right into it. You founded the program back in 2006 as one school. I believe it was at Carson's.
Karsten's was the first elementary school, but I there's always a little piece of it that people don't typically talk about or maybe even know about, and that is that while I was trying to figure out how to start, I was going around and talking to different people in the city, tons of it, about a year and a half of talking to people, and I got to this one pastor in Southwest Detroit, and he said, "You know what? I need you to meet the executive director of a group called Living Arts.
Yes,
Sure, you're familiar with them.
yes, very much.
Um, at the time, his name was Chris Blunden, and his wife Christine was the dance instructor. That was mainly what they were doing, Southwest Dance. And so Chris and I met, and he said, "You know, I have a grant that needs to get used up by the end of the summer." This was probably, I don't know, in March or April that we were talking. And he said, "What about doing like an arts camp together?"
Okay.
So we developed this program, a 2-week program housed at Messiah Church in Southwest Detroit on Toledo Avenue. Um, and they had, by this time, they had a lot of clientele, with dancing. And so they put out the word that for 2 weeks we would be doing singing, dancing, and visual art every day, Monday through Friday for 2 weeks. And we did. And it was an amazing camp for 2 weeks, where the kids they kind of choose their major. They could either major in dance or in singing.
Wow.
The visual art was like everybody had the same amount every day. But if you were majoring in dance, you had 2 sessions of dance and 1 session of singing, and vice versa. So so by the end, we had a program to perform for the families. And I'll tell you what, we had it in their sanctuary. The place was packed to the gills with families from Southwest Detroit supporting their kids. And we did this program. I think the kids sang about 3 or 4 pieces in harmony, and I was really amazing. They were very capable young people, and they learned very quickly. and they did dance and so forth. Well, it was such an enthusiastic response that I went back to Chris and I said, this sounds like the perfect place to put our first neighborhood choir because we already have a foothold here. We've people in the whole neighborhood know about us because we've done this program. So I thought for sure it would just take off like crazy. But in Southwest Detroit, dancing was a lot more of their culture than singing in a choir. Singing in a choir in Southwest Detroit is mostly done in a church,
Right.
as a church, like the Catholic Church. So a lot of the kids were involved in choir at church, but coming out on an afternoon after school, parents working, blah blah blah. We had the choir in Southwest Detroit. We moved it from one place to another a few times. We were, like I said, collaborating with all different organizations, trying to figure out the best place to have it where it was most convenient for the families to get their kids there and home again. But that Southwest Detroit choir existed for probably about 6 years.
Wow.
And that was actually the first thing. And
Wow.
then the first school we went to was Karstens. And then from there, uh, Karstens principal spread the word. And the next thing you know, we had 3 schools in that far east side,
Yeah.
um, and then one in Southwest Detroit, Academy of the Americas. So
That's amazing. And it just goes to show how like one idea, like one experience, just like that, to be able to do a 2-week program, just all of a sudden everything just like little seeds turn into plants and those plants grow and become beautiful flowers. It's just so cool to hear that. Like, wow. Like,
yeah.
and I think it just kind of like segues into just my next question. What inspired you to create such a program like the Detroit Children's Choir?
Wow, that's one of my favorite stories. So I was at an American Choral Directors Association regional conference in Indianapolis, in Indiana,
Fellow member.
in 2000. What is it? 2004, I think it was 2005, and must have been 2004. Chicago Children's Choir came on. They were of the, you're there for a few days, you start to glaze over because so much incredible music is being done. And I'm seeing that this children's choir is coming out on the stage, and I'm like, oh, I can just take a nap or something.
Right.
Well, they took the place by storm. People were on their feet, which is rare, before they finished their program. They were just so enthusiastic. But the main thing was not just the level of energy that they had, and they had such a connection to one another, such a connection to every single song that they sang. And it was a variety of literature from all over the world. And it was like it was their own. They were so connected to it. And then on top of that, they were connected to the audience. The audience was, they drew the audience in so well. But the most important thing that I saw was it was the face of Chicago in front of me. Everybody was there. The tall, the short, the black, the white, the yellow, everybody was there. Younger ones and high school ones and so forth. And they were so unified and they were so confident. They were so confident. I said, anybody, any one of those young people walked into a room, you would want to hear from them because they had this presence about them, this confidence, and they were just comfortable with themselves and comfortable in a performance setting and so forth. And I was like, we need this in Detroit.
Yeah.
So I'm in like still this performance is still going on. They usually last about 30 minutes. So somewhere along the line, this little thing came into my mind saying, we need this in Detroit. Why isn't there something like this in Detroit? I wonder if anybody's ever tried this before in Detroit. Wonder. And then finally this little voice came in, and it was when they were singing I Need You to Survive. The voice said, you need to do this in Detroit.
Wow.
And that's how it started.
That I'm just so amazed, and just how something like that, that spark that just kicks in, and it, not having anything like that in Detroit before, to be able to do that, it's just so cool to be able
Well,
to.
like I said, then it spent a lot of time going around the city trying to figure out what had happened, if there had been any attempts. There had been. None of them were successful, and I came to the conclusion finally that and I was a total unknown in Detroit because I've been living overseas and all these different places, and I had no career in Detroit except for I had done some church choirs in the suburbs, but I didn't have any real Detroit presence. So I was unknown. So I couldn't have anything to do with me because I was not known. Um, and I think that the other groups revolved around a person, the leader. And if that was the focus, it didn't succeed. The focus had to be around the children. And
Okay.
so everything had to be focused at giving these children opportunities and growing them through music and bringing them together and all of that, because that's all it was about, all of that, connecting kids from around the city with each other, singing together, building social connections, growing them in so many ways with the experiences that they were having. And so I think that is why Detroit Children's Choir could succeed, because it was focused on the right thing, not the individual at the top, but
Yes.
the children themselves. So
Absolutely. And it always revolves around the students. I mean, to kind of bounce off what you were saying about Chicago Children's Choir, I ended up seeing them we're also, Detroit Children's Choir is also a member organization of Chorus America. Shout out to Chorus America as well.
yeah.
And we went to the performance conference in Chicago a couple years ago, and Chicago Children's Choir was there. And the one thing, like they sounded phenomenal. It was an amazing, like they standing ovation by the second song. It was that
Mhm.
kind of thing. But
Yep.
there was one thing missing. Where's the conductor?
Oh
You know,
yeah.
it's all about the students,
Mhm.
and it's about their voices singing together in harmony, making beautiful music all across the city of Chicago. And just like that, the city of Detroit, like for us in the city of Detroit, it's the faces of Detroit, it's the voices of Detroit
Right.
singing out. And I think that's just to your
Yeah.
point, it's amazing to watch.
Yeah, that was the thing. The Chicago Children's Choir provided a great model for me. I went and studied their model. I went to Chicago a few times to observe and sit in on things and follow them around. Checked out some neighborhood choirs, some in-school choirs. They do a thing called Paint the Town Red like a school day in the spring, where they just divide out into they start out in the central location in an auditorium in Chicago,
Okay.
sing together, all 3,000, or that at the time it was 3,000, now there's like 7,000 kids involved, but they sing together in this one space, and then they all go out to their various communities and sing at different locations. And I went with one of the groups, and I was in tears a few times, because of how their singing in the neighborhood impacted the neighborhood.
Right.
And I said, "Well, this is it. This is exactly what I want to do." And and to go back to the beginnings, Chicago Children's Choir supported us the first 2 years for our spring concert. The first year was this is one of those memorable experiences. I was doing this all by myself. I didn't have a board yet, even. And I gets this phone call from somebody that I knew from Chicago Children's Choir, because I'd been there. And, she says, one of our neighborhood choirs wants to come to Detroit for their tour in the spring. This is
Oh,
in January.
wow.
She said,
Okay.
they want to come. Would you host us? I was like, oh my gosh. Um, how
Oh
could I say
my.
no to this? How could I say no? I mean, this was the perfect opportunity to show Detroit what this was all about, right?
Yeah.
So I said, give me a couple days to work on this. So I hung up the phone. And in Karsten's elementary school, there was another organization who was doing work there with their students, the Junior League of Detroit.
Yes.
I had met two of the people who were working at Karsten's, just because we were both in the same building. And I had the information to call one of them. So I called her. I thought, well, I wonder if the Junior League could help me. And sure enough, she said, let's get together with a few of the leaders from the organization and talk through this. Maybe we can help you. So we did on a snowy day. I remember meeting at somebody's house in Grosse Pointe, and we sat around about 5 or 6 women, and I told them my dilemma, kind of the dilemma, but the opportunity, and kind of what I had in mind for hosting these kids for the weekend.
Yeah.
And they said they were right on board. First of all, they were right on board, but second of all, they had much higher expectations than I ever would have. They were like shooting for the stars. They wanted them to sing at the Charles Wright African American Museum. I had this little church over here that I was thinking about, but they wanted them to sing, and in the end, and they had all these connections all around Detroit, so they were able to put together activities for them at the Motown Museum, and they did tour the Charles Wright, and I mean, they put together the whole weekend.
Oh,
Luckily, this particular choir is from the Off the Street Club in Chicago, which is a lot of at-risk kids.
yeah.
And so they have to stay in a hotel. They can't stay in people's homes. But normally, the Chicago Children's Choir, when they tour, they stay in people's homes. So that part of it was not something we had to deal with. But so they stayed in a hotel. But for the whole day and evening activities that we were all planned, you know, by mostly the junior league, and Mary Lubera, who was the person I spoke to on the phone. She had the spreadsheets and she had everything organized, and I'm telling you, that is how we got started. Chicago Children's Choir, off the street club neighborhood choir, came to town. We had our whole, it was like a day and a half together. They performed at the Plymouth Church of Christ,
Yep.
which was just a walking distance from Charles Wright. Charles Wright was busy that day, so
Sure.
we were able to have it at the Plymouth Church of Christ, which is a very important place too in Detroit.
Yeah.
And so food and everything else, they all was all provided, and Junior League did that. So, but Chicago Children's Choir came, provided the body. We did some singing ahead of time. The Detroit Children's Choir had a few songs in the beginning. The Chicago Children's Choir neighborhood choir came and did the kind of the body of the concert, and then we sang collaboratively together at the end a few pieces.
Wow.
And it was amazing. And it's just Chicago. And then the next year they sent this next year I called them and I said, hey, how about if you send some more, we'll host you. By this time we had more support.
Sure.
And we hosted it was kind of a combined group of neighborhood choir kids
Oh,
from 2 or 3 different neighborhood choirs, 2 directors and their accompanist. And they did stay in people's homes, which was all another whole project.
sure.
And they stayed for like 2.5 days.
Wow.
And we performed at the music hall that year. So
Oh, that's so cool. Yes. Love it. Oh,
yeah, so it was, again, I can't thank them enough, Chicago Children's Choir, for A, being the model, but B, just being there for us, and taking part in the growth and just introducing the idea to Detroit.
absolutely. I mean, you just be able to get that start and get the ground running for Detroit Children's Choir to be able to do what we're doing now. I mean, we can't thank them enough for helping us and getting us started. It's amazing. So we've talked a lot about like the things that have happened in our history of the Detroit Children's Choir, the start and so many collaborations and the people that helped us along the way, and and all the great people that supported us. Here's my next question. What are your hopes and your dreams for the Detroit Children's Choir? We're celebrating 15 years. What are your hopes and dreams for the Detroit Children's Choir in the next 15 years?
Well, I think some of the hopes and dreams are still the same ones. Um, I I would like to see um, a wider cross section of the different cultures that we have in the Detroit area represented in the choir. because I feel like, and I've always said this, I feel like when the children sing together, then the parents get to know one another, and it really builds the bridges and kind of knocks down barriers and things like that, because the community of this, this diverse community is embracing their children together.
Yes.
And so there is just this kind of erasure of any division, and a definite building of understanding and appreciation for one another. And I think that the kids, I've always said this, I felt like the children can help with the healing of a community and can really lead the way, actually. So I would still like to see more diversity. Like we have a Chinese American community, or we have a Japanese, we have the Polish, we have the um, Romanians. I'm just trying. They're Arabic, all the Arabic communities, and um, so that's one of my dreams, and it has always been. I wanted it. I want to still see, like I did with the Chicago Children's Choir, that face of Detroit,
Yes.
for one thing. But the second thing is, I think it's time to start going out into the wider community beyond our metro area, beyond Michigan and so forth. And it's those opportunities that will grow these kids in another way, and open their eyes to things that they had no idea existed, in the past, and kind of raise their kind of bar as to where they want to be, when they grow into adulthood and so forth, when they have the opportunity to, you know, make their direction, decide on their direction. So yeah, traveling would be another thing. Just not just traveling for traveling's sake, but traveling for a purpose, and being ambassadors as we always have been, but ambassadors a little farther afield, maybe.
Absolutely. So one of the things I know I've told you this before, Carol, it's like, to be able to, like perform in Detroit, travel a little bit further out, travel a
Yep.
little bit further out. If I could do like the United States on my hand, travel out through that, get the globe out and travel out through that. I mean, absolutely. Because, it's like to be able to just see the world and, to be a part of such an amazing inclusive community, we have to include, everybody to be able to just see the world around us and respect, you know, all walks of life, all people. And so I think that I absolutely agree on
Yeah.
all those points.
Yeah.
It's like doing everything we can to build that inclusive community, create.
Right, right. And then just reaching more and more kids in our Metro Detroit area, being able to reach them. Like I said, Chicago at the time when we started was about 3,000 kids, which I thought was like mind blowing, but now they're like 7,500 or something, maybe even more than that. So yeah, and that's a lot of school choirs, um, and strategically placed neighborhood choirs all around that Metro Chicago area, and of course their Voice of Chicago, their performing choir, or their
Absolutely.
top choir.
Absolutely. It starts with our school and our neighborhood programs, goes into our touring groups, the civic
Mhm.
groups, and and it's all included. It's all part of building that structure of, of everyone coming together. It's just phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
Yes, and another thing that I'm going to throw this one in there too. It's also important because we just talked about collaborations a whole lot.
Yes.
Um, but collaborative performances, kind of subject areas, music and science, music and
Yes.
history, music and visual art, all that kind of music and dance. I mean, vocal and dance and so forth, and just finding ways to kind of make it more interdisciplinary with organizations in the Detroit area or even farther afield. But I think starting with Detroit, there's plenty of opportunities um, to collaborate with other organizations to do something.
So one of our partnerships is with the Ford Motor Company Fund, and they've been supporting us for so many years. And just
Mhm.
thank you, Ford Motor Company Fund, for all that you do for us. When we started doing quarter notes with DCC, they didn't put us in the arts section. They put us in the STEM section, the
Oh,
STEAM.
nice.
Yep. So it's all kind of, encompassing, not just the music side, but also like learning about ourselves and, all those things. So we're on our way. This is huge.
Yeah, that is really huge. I love that. And you've just got all these different organizations, the Science Museum and the Charles Wright, and like you said, Henry Ford. You got the whole Henry Ford Museum in Greenfield, and I mean, just so many things that when could create opportunities to collaborate.
Absolutely, absolutely. Collaboration is very key, especially in this day and age with the pandemic and everything that's going on. At the time that this interview was recorded, we are still in the middle of our pandemic. We keep these videos up forever, that kind of thing. But it does actually kind of segue into my next question for you. We are in the middle of the pandemic at the time of this interview. Luckily, the numbers are going down in Michigan, and vaccines are going up, so we're hoping to be back to in person very, very soon. But I think in this age of the pandemic, how important is it to keep music education alive in our communities?
It's very important because kids have been isolated for over a year, and one of the things that we value, and that we know is a huge part of choral singing, is community. And the children need that. They need community, and they need a safe community where they can be themselves, and they know that um, they're not going to be ridiculed for whatever it is that makes them a little different, maybe. So it's even more important, actually, to be able to provide that safe place for them to grow, for them to interact with children of all types, as you say, to give them the place to grow in a healthy way and to share in a healthy way, with other children. So whatever way, music education is so much more than the music itself. um, and it provides things that academics just cannot. you know it gets to a part of a child's soul and spirit, and their brain, even their consciousness, that it just gets to an area that isn't addressed in any of the academics, really. And so, especially at this time, with these kids being isolated and with them not being able to have the normal interaction with other children, to have something like this is really important. And of course, if they're singing uh, material that has text that maybe helps them process through things, to talk about things that they are dealing with, or even messages that they can carry with them. It's always been my goal, actually, to have the music um, that really they can take with them, and it will serve them well as they grow up. The texts that they can remember and think, oh yeah, I sang about this one time. We talked about this. You know, I I'm aware of this. I know what this is. And it just builds their confidence, and it builds them into a stronger individual, I think. So I'm looking at it more from musically. Of course, we like to build them as musicians, and hopefully some of them will maybe end up in that field. But that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is building them as a whole child, and you know giving them opportunity to process things through music, and connect through music. So
Absolutely. I've always said, in to the choir, I've always said that, it'd be great if you go off and be this amazing musician, but that's not the point. It's
mhm,
about creating the whole person. It's about, reaching into that that depth of yourself, your soul, your spirit, whatever you want to call it, to find beauty in the world.
mhm.
And there is beauty in all disciplines, and there's artistry in all disciplines, but I think it's really exemplified by the work that we do in the Detroit Children's Choir and in music education in general. To be able
Yeah.
to, find, what a person was thinking when they wrote that particular poem,
Mhm.
or to, why did they do this in 4/4 versus 3/4, and, starting to get into those kinds of questions as well. And I think I found during this Zoom time, in the midst of, the new phrases, zoom out, like a burnout instead, but zoom out, like, because they're all in all these classes, they're all on Zoom now. Uh,
Yeah.
but we're all moving and grooving and, doing stretches and, doing all these breathing exercises, it just keeps students engaged,
Mhm.
especially during this weird time in our world, to be frank. And it's just, I wholeheartedly agree with you, Carol. I mean, this is so amazing to hear that. So we are going to have many of our students watching these videos. It's going to be online, it's going to be on Facebook, and many future students that we don't even know we're going to have as future students yet. And alumni will be watching this, and all of everyone involved will be, so happy to see you in this interview. It's going to be amazing. So I was wondering if, during these closing moments of our time together, if you had any words of advice to our students in the Detroit Children's Choir as they grow in our program.
Yeah, I think that one thing that they should always keep in mind is to take advantage of every opportunity that they have. And whatever opportunities come along, you just don't know where they will lead you. And it's honestly like uh, the question of how I came into choral music actually has a lot to do with you mentioned this question on my sheet here, so I'm going back to that only because I grew up completely unaware that this was happening in my life. I started singing in a choir when I was 3 years old in a church choir, and I never stopped singing in choirs, but I never really thought about it. It was just fun. I did it. I loved it. And I didn't know that it was going to lead me to where I am or where I have been all along. It just did. And I mean, honestly, I was going to major in math in college.
Really?
I never even took a math course once I got there. But it took me a while even to realize that music was always part of what I was studying.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, I'm always doing a music class, or I'm always in the choir, or I'm always, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So you don't know. And that's what I was going to say. The advice is go do the things, take full advantage. Don't let anything go by. Don't let any opportunity go by. Grab a hold of the opportunities because you just never know where they're going to lead you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What a great note to end our time together on. Absolutely. I mean, Ms. Carol Schoch, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. None of this would be possible without your vision, your leadership, your artistry and creativity, and growing the program in the way it has. And if I had one of those like toast glasses, I would say cheers to 15 years and cheers to another 15 more. Thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Well, thank you, Eric, for what you're doing. And again, I do appreciate you including me as a part of the 15th year celebration. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And on that note, this has been Quarter Notes with the DCC. I'm Eric Taylor. Have a great day.